My brother called me a leech and said I'd never own a house. Dad laughed too. So I sent them a photo of my new keys, and seconds later my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It started with a single photo. A silver key, resting in my palm, with the caption, "Guess the leech grew wings." I hit send, dropped my phone on the counter, and went back to unpacking my kitchen boxes. 30 seconds later, the buzzing started. And it didn't stop. First was a call from Brian, my older brother. I watched it ring out. Then a text from him, short and sour. What the hell is this supposed to mean? Then came my father, then Brian again, then a family group chat that hadn't been used in over a year suddenly lighting up like Christmas. But let me take you back a few years, because this story, like most things in my life, didn't start with a photo. It started in the garage. My garage. My bedroom. My temporary living situation that had lasted far too long for Brian's taste. "You're 27, dude," he sneered one Thanksgiving, beer in hand, feet kicked up on the same coffee table I'd built in high school. "You gonna sponge off mom and dad forever, or what? I swear, you're like some kind of leech." Dad laughed. Not a chuckle. A full-body laugh, as if my existence was some inside joke he was finally ready to let out. I didn't respond. I never did. That's what they hated most. The silence. See, the thing is, they had no idea. Every morning, I got up before the sun, slipped out the side door, and started my first job hauling freight at a shipping dock. 6 hours of cold metal and sore shoulders. Then a quick bite, a shirt change, and off to the bookstore. My second job. Minimum wage, but steady. I didn't complain. I didn't party. I didn't post pictures of vacations or fancy dinners like Brian. I didn't buy anything I didn't need. I just worked. And saved. While Brian posted photos with new cars, talking about equity and monthly interest returns, like he'd invented real estate, I kept quiet. When he made jabs at family dinners about how some people just don't want to grow up, I smiled and passed the gravy. Dad would add his little zingers too. "Well, not everyone's cut out for the big leagues. Some folks just like the bench." I took it. Every insult. Every laugh. Every sideways glance. Not because I agreed with them, but because I had a plan. And it started to fall into place the day I found her. The house. A fixer-upper tucked into the edge of the county line. Overgrown lawn. Peeling paint. A cracked foundation, literally and figuratively. But beneath it I saw it. The bones. The value. The future. I made an offer. Paid cash. No loan. No cosigner. No mortgage. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my coworkers. And definitely not my family. I wanted the moment to be mine. Quiet. Private. Real. That photo? That key in my palm? That was my only announcement. The softest flex I could think of. But it turned out, when you've been the family joke for a decade, even a whisper sounds like a thunderclap. And I had no idea how loud things were about to get. It didn't take long for the silence I'd weaponized all those years to boomerang back as noise. Loud, clumsy, desperate noise. Brian called again. I let it go. Then came a voice message. "So what, you finally scraped together enough for a keychain? Cute. Let me guess, you're renting a room in someone's basement?" I didn't answer. Just kept peeling off the old paint in the hallway of my very own house, a slow, satisfying rhythm. The kind of work no one ever sees but somehow means everything. Then came Dad. Text message short and clean, "We should talk." For years, "We should talk" meant one of two things: either I disappointed them somehow, or Brian needed something and they wanted me to play backup. This time? It read like a white flag. I smirked and left him on read. But what really got me wasn't their reaction. It was the timing. A few hours after I sent the photo, Brian's wife, Sarah, messaged me. We weren't close. Never had been. But she'd always been polite. Neutral at best. Her message? Congrats. Brian didn't mean what he said all those times. He just gets competitive. You know how he is. It read like someone trying to get ahead of an earthquake. Like she knew he was unraveling. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just about a house. This was about what the house meant. Brian had built his image around being the successful one. The homeowner. The adult. He drove a leased BMW with a payment bigger than most people's rent and bragged about his mortgage to the hilt. Lifestyle like it was a badge of honor. Now the Leech had wings. And flew right past him. The kicker? I hadn't even shown them the house yet. I hadn't posted a front door selfie or bragged about my granite countertops or the view from the deck. All I did was send a photo of keys. And that alone had cracked something open in him. Later that night, my phone buzzed again, this time, with a passive-aggressive group chat message from Brian. Funny how some people think owning something cheap is better than investing. Hope you didn't buy in a flood zone. A flood zone. He was reaching, and I knew it. But what really sealed it? A private message from Sarah, just a minute later. Please don't respond. He's embarrassed. That was the first moment I felt it. Not just satisfaction, but power. After years of being the one made small, I had done something big, and they didn't know how to handle it. And I wasn't done yet. Because I hadn't told them the best part. No mortgage. No strings. No debt. I was going to invite them over. Let them see it with their own eyes. And when I dropped that final truth, it would be like flipping the whole script on them in one quiet sentence. They had no idea what was coming. By the third day, the group chat had gone quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, more like the quiet in a room just before a storm breaks. I could feel them recalibrating, working behind the scenes to figure out how to respond without looking like they'd lost. That's when I decided it was time. I sent a message, not to the group chat, but directly to Brian and Dad. Housewarming Sunday. Noon. Address is below. If you're curious what a leech's wings look like, come see for yourself. That was it. No emojis. No passive aggression. Just facts. I didn't even have furniture yet. The couch I ordered hadn't arrived, and I was still eating meals on an upside-down storage bin, but that didn't matter. This wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming something. Brian replied in under 5 minutes. I'll be there. Hope you have more than one chair. Dad didn't reply. Classic. But Sunday came faster than expected. I cleaned the place like it mattered, which it did. I mowed the lawn, lined up my second-hand mugs on the new kitchen counter, and opened every window to let the place breathe. It smelled like new paint and quiet pride. At 11:55, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Brian's SUV. Parked like he owned the place. He stepped out with that same cocky energy he wore like cologne, except this time, it felt thinner. Like a costume that didn't quite fit anymore. And Dad? Right behind him, slower, wearing his old college hoodie, pretending this wasn't a big deal. But the way he looked around, wide-eyed, scanning the porch and siding like he was trying to find a crack, told me everything. Nice little spot, Brian said, glancing at the neighborhood. Quiet. Not bad, honestly. I didn't say much. Just stepped aside and opened the door. They walked in. The hardwood floors I refinished myself. The kitchen backsplash I'd installed over 3 weekends. The little sunroom in the back with a view that no photo could ever capture. I let them soak it in. Brian made a show of shrugging. You know, with some updates, this place could be worth something. I smiled. No updates needed. It's already mine. Dad looked up from the kitchen sink. You rent this from someone you know? I shook my head. I bought it. Brian leaned against the counter. Still. Must have taken a miracle to qualify for a mortgage in this market. That was the moment I'd waited for. I reached into the drawer, pulled out a plain manila envelope, and handed it to my father. No mortgage. He opened it. Stared. The deed. Paid in full. My name on every line. I turned to Brian. You said I'd never own a house? You were wrong. And I didn't just buy one, I bought it outright. He didn't say anything. His face didn't move. but I watched something leave his eyes. That sense of superiority, the illusion he'd clung to for years, it flickered and disappeared. Dad gave a short, awkward chuckle. Well, guess the leech did good. But his voice lacked its usual edge. It sounded hollow. That's when I realized, this wasn't revenge. This was justice. And I hadn't screamed. I hadn't insulted. I hadn't thrown anything in their faces. I'd just succeeded. And they had no play left. Brian didn't sit. He just hovered, hands on hips, jaw tight, like he was still trying to wake up from a dream where I had won. I mean, he finally said, it's not like it's a huge place. That was his pivot. Minimize. Diminish. Pretend he wasn't rattled. It's not, I said, nodding calmly. But it's mine. No 30-year leash. No debt hanging over my head. Dad stood by the window, staring out like the view offended him. So you've just been, what, working in silence this whole time? He asked. I shrugged. 2 jobs. No vacations. No new cars. No wasted nights trying to impress people. That one hit. I saw it on Brian's face. Because deep down, he knew, he had been performing for years. I'd been building. And the floor under him was starting to feel less solid. Brian finally sat, on the edge of the only chair I had, as if it might betray him at any moment. His leg bounced. His eyes kept scanning the room like he was searching for something to mock but finding nothing that would stick. Dad leaned against the wall. Still quiet. I mean, Brian said after a long pause, you probably had help, right? A gift? An inheritance or something? I smiled. That was the last thread he had left, the idea that this couldn't have been me. That I couldn't have done it alone. Nope, I said. Every dime came from paychecks and patience. He laughed once, like it was still possible to laugh at me. That's wild. I mean, while you were doing that, I was living. I nodded. Yeah. You were. The silence stretched. Because we both knew what that meant. The truth about his living was written all over his life. The max cards. The boat he never used. The home equity line he took to cover other loans. The image that cost more than it ever returned. And now, standing in a house that was mine, he looked smaller than he ever had. You know, Brian muttered. It's kinda sad, actually. You worked all those hours, skipped everything, just to get this? He gestured around like he was doing me a favor, showing me the tragedy I hadn't noticed. I didn't flinch. Yeah, I said. This. Peace. No debt collectors. No pretending. Dad crossed his arms, voice low. Don't act like you're better than us. I looked at him then, really looked. The man who used to laugh along with Brian, who called me a leech at the dinner table, like I wasn't his son but a house guest who overstayed his welcome. I'm not better, I said. I just finally stopped playing the role you wrote for me. That landed. Not hard. Not loud. Just enough to shift the room. Brian stood up, restless now. So what, you invited us here to gloat? No, I said. I invited you to see it. Because the last time you looked at me, you saw someone who'd never make it. I just thought you should see what I've made. They didn't speak. Because for the first time in a long time, they didn't have a script for this. Brian wandered into the kitchen like he owned the place, ran his hand along the countertop like he was inspecting it for flaws. Granite? He said, almost to himself. Looks new. It is, I replied. Did it myself. He raised an eyebrow. You? With what, YouTube tutorials? Exactly that. I smiled. And a borrowed tile saw. He gave a dry laugh and opened the fridge uninvited. Found it nearly empty, some eggs, a bottle of water, leftovers in foil. Still eating like you're broke though, huh? Discipline doesn't turn off, I said. That's why I'm standing here with no mortgage, and you're drowning. It slipped out. Quiet. Unintended. But accurate. Brian closed the fridge slowly. His jaw twitched. You don't know anything about my finances, he said flatly. I didn't respond. Because I did know. The cracks had been showing for years. The way his credit card bills, accidentally, showed up in my inbox once. The time Dad joked about Brian's refinance. The new toys, drone, smartwatch, boat, and then the sudden quiet when it came to repairs, the missed birthdays, the payment plans for everything. I hadn't mocked it. I hadn't mentioned it. Not once. But now that he was standing in a house paid in full, the math was doing itself. Dad shifted in the doorway. "Brian's doing fine," he said too quickly. "I hope so," I replied. "Because debt doesn't care about pride. And neither does equity." Brian took a step forward, voice lower now. "You think you've won something?" I looked around. "I think I bought something no one can take from me. And I did it after years of being told I couldn't." He stared at me for a moment. I saw it, all of it. The confusion, the envy, the need to say something that would put me back in my place. But there was no place anymore. Not the one they had built for me. And he knew it. So instead, he turned away. "Nice place," he said finally. "Really? Congrats." Dad didn't say anything. He just followed Brian to the door. On his way out, he paused, looked back once, eyes scanning the room, not with pride, but with distance. Like he was trying to figure out how it all slipped away from him. Maybe, deep down, he'd always believed Brian was the legacy. But that day, it was me holding the keys. The door closed behind them with a soft finality. I stood in the quiet that followed, the echo of their footsteps still in the walls. For a long time, I didn't move. I just listened, to the house. My house. The creak of settling wood, the hum of the fridge, the low wind brushing the eaves. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time in my life, the air didn't feel heavy anymore. The next day, I got a message from Sarah. "Brian didn't sleep. Just kept pacing. He's shaken." I didn't reply. She didn't expect me to. But I knew what she meant. Because men like Brian build their identity like a house of mirrors, wide and shiny, but fragile as hell. And I'd just thrown a stone through every single wall. 3 days later, the text came. From Dad this time. "Proud of you. You were quiet, but you were working. I see that now." Then, a second one, minutes later. "You know, maybe I was too hard on you." That one sat differently. I read it twice, then once more. Because coming from him, it was almost impossible to believe. Dad didn't apologize. He didn't reflect. His whole life had been a monologue with no pause button. I thought about replying. I typed out a few things. Deleted them. Finally I sent. "I didn't need you to believe in me. I just needed you to stop laughing." He never responded to that. But he didn't need to. Some things hang in the air louder than any reply. Later that week, I got another message, Brian again. This time, it wasn't sarcastic or defensive. "How did you do it? I mean, really?" I stared at the screen for a while. He never asked me a real question in his life. Never been curious about my grind, my choices, my focus. To him, I had always been background noise. Now I was a headline. So I typed back. Discipline. Patience. Not spending money to impress people who'd never respect me anyway. He didn't reply. But the message was marked, read, within seconds. Then came the photo. A picture of Brian's boat. For sale. Listed online. That was when I knew. It had started. Not just the reckoning, but the shift. For years I was the one who walked with my head down, shoulders tight, pretending not to hear their jokes, not to notice how small they made me feel. But that house changed everything, not because of the walls or the deed, but because it couldn't be denied. Success, when it's quiet and undeniable, is the loudest thing in the room. And suddenly, I was the one they couldn't ignore. It had been a week since they visited. The messages stopped. The calls too. But what came next was something I hadn't expected. A letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, tucked into my mailbox like it belonged in another era. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first, shaky, uncertain. But when I opened it, I recognized the voice immediately. It was Dad. Son, I don't know if this will reach you the way I mean it to. But I'm writing because maybe words work better when you don't have to look someone in the eye to say them. I laughed because I was ashamed. That's the truth. You reminded me of everything I gave up when I was your age: stability, independence, humility. Instead, I spent my life chasing a version of success that looked good but left me with nothing solid to stand on. I didn't build anything. You did. And that scared me more than I want to admit. I always thought Brian would carry the torch. But I see now, you were carrying it the whole time. Quietly. Without asking for applause. You did it right. And I'm sorry I didn't say that when it mattered. Dad. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. For the first time, he'd peeled back the armor. And underneath it wasn't pride or smugness, but a man who'd built a castle on credit cards and borrowed time, and now saw his youngest son had built something better, brick by quiet brick. But as much as I appreciated it, I wasn't interested in redemption arcs. Because the apology didn't change the past. It didn't erase the dinners where I was mocked. The birthdays I paid for because they forgot. The years I gave them everything, only to be reminded I was the least of them. So I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer beside the deed. Not out of bitterness. Just closure. Later that night, I got one more message. This time from Sarah. Brian's thinking about selling the house. Downsizing. He doesn't say it, but I think seeing what you built, it shook him. He's angry. Not at you. At himself. She paused, then added. You didn't just prove them wrong. You made them look at themselves. That was never the goal. But I'll admit, it felt right. There was something powerful in knowing I didn't rise by stepping on them. I rose despite them. I didn't win through noise, or performance, or posturing. I won with quiet effort. With 5 a.m. alarms and second-hand boots. With takeout containers and thrift store mugs. With discipline so consistent it became invisible to everyone but me. And now? Now they all saw it. Clear as daylight. The leech didn't grow wings overnight. He just stopped feeding them, and started feeding his future. The house is quiet tonight. No more calls. No more letters. Just me, a cup of coffee, and the steady hum of a life I built myself. Looking back, I realize they needed me to stay small. Not because they hated me, but because it made them feel bigger. I don't hate them. I don't even resent them anymore. Because if they hadn't mocked me, if they hadn't called me a leech or laughed when I stayed home, I might have tried to prove them wrong their way. With flash. With debt. With noise. Instead, I chose the long road. The slow one. The one with calloused hands and quiet pride. And now I've arrived. So if you're in that place, unseen, underestimated, overlooked, let them talk. Let them laugh. Then show them. Let your work speak louder than their words. That's what I tell anyone now. Grow your wings. Then fly past every person who thought you couldn't.